Hello, and welcome to our virtual broadcast of the Social Media Golden Hour for Emergency Public Information, presented by none other than Holly Harden and Mark Bassnight. Mark is the Strategic Communications Director at Summit ET. Mark's focus is managing strategic communication planning, training, and exercise efforts for effective communication, what we're doing right now. Mark served as a senior emergency management communication analyst at Argonne National Laboratory prior to moving to Summit ET. Holly is the strategic communications program manager, also at ET. She manages, develops, and delivers strategic communications, exercise support, and technical assistance. Holly also manages strategic communications research analysis. Prior to joining Summit ET, Holly served as the Emergency Management Communications Analyst at A&L. If you have questions during the session, you can click on the chat tool and enter them there, and I will relay them if we have time at the end of this presentation. Please join me in welcoming Holly and Mark to the virtual stage.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Social Media Golden Hour for Emergency Public Information. My name is Mark Bassnight. I'll be one of the facilitators, presenters. We're so glad that you joined us on this virtual platform, and we want you to engage. We're going to be engaging with you. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your input, your feedback, your questions, your comments. So please use the chat pod. As a matter of fact, why don't we start that right now? Let us know where you're viewing from. All over the country, just use the chat pod right now. Let's get used to doing that and let us know where you're chatting from.
And hi, everybody. My name is Holly Harden. I'll be your co-facilitator today for the Social Media Golden Hour for Emergency Public Information. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about getting relevant information to the intended audiences at the appropriate time and talk about how imperative and challenging it can be in this age of digital communication we're all navigating out there, especially in this current disinformation ecosystem. We're going to address providing timely, accurate, and relevant information to our intended audiences so they can make the best decisions about their life, health, and safety. We're also going to provide a succinct process for implementing a simple communication strategy and a tool for triaging information to effectively communicate with social media audiences. We're going to talk about the golden hour of communication on social media and why that's so important. We're going to discuss the value of communicating effectively via social media and identify some best practices. And additionally, we're going to present strategies that you can employ directly into your team's plans, policies, procedures, and protocols. So let's lay the foundation a little bit here. Let's put this in context about why this is so incredibly important, particularly now. According to this January 2020 Digital Trends resource, digital, mobile, and social media have become an indispensable part of everyday life for people all over the world. In fact, more than 4.5 billion people now use the internet, and social media users have almost surpassed the 4 billion user mark. Nearly 60% of the world's population is already online, and more than half the world's population uses social media today. I think that just underscores the importance of how we have a need to be connected as human beings. So let's talk a little bit more about what we know in this context. Well, firstly, social media is not just a technology. It's a human interaction, a conversation. It's social. It's really a mode of human interaction made possible by technology. And as such, it has its own standards of behavior, its own centers of influence, its own measures of success, and so on. So let's address the methods for identifying, aggregating, analyzing, and operationalizing information using these tools and platforms. Today, we can use social media to engage stakeholders strategically. We can use social media channels as a feedback mechanism. We can use it for assisting communicators in identifying the receipt and success of messaging, in addition to identifying necessary changes in content and key messages.
And Holly, it's really important to note also that we're not only using this information externally, but we're using social media platforms now and to gather and to disseminate information internally also.
Absolutely, Mark. And just to really amplify the fact how have this need to be connected all the time, let's look at mobile app technology too. We all have seen how Twitter and Facebook have really evolved into primary sources of information during an emergency incident. From local counties telling residents to evacuate to neighbors calling for help, the use of social media has far reaching impact on communications in times of crisis. But we've also seen that the evolution of widespread use of mobile devices combined with the rise in popularity of social media have really changed our information consumption and expectation habits as well. I'd just like to address here that if you look at that first statistic there, chat apps account for almost 90% of mobile app usage globally. That really just highlights our need to be connected anywhere, any place.
Yeah, and Holly, why don't we just have them in the chat box? If you use two or more social media platforms or one of these areas, let us know. If you use several of these, just let us know in the chat because this is life today.
Absolutely, Mark. So we've laid a little context here for what we're managing and navigating out there. Well, how do we do it? Well, firstly, we have to have a prepared team. We have to anticipate, prepare, and practice in this incredibly fast-paced information ecosystem on social media. So let's talk about using pre-approved messages firstly. We really need to have a frank discussion with our staff about expectations regarding approved releasable information. We tend to lean toward the no comment about things that we feel like the public doesn't need to know. However, we really need to ask ourselves, why not? If the information we're releasing doesn't have any known impacts, present or future, on security, then why not? Get that information out there. We need to also make sure that the people responsible for approving information are available, they're numerous, and they have a clear understanding of communication needs. It's also a best practice to engage leadership and communication leads before an emergency occurs to develop those pre-approved messages for dissemination via social media. It's a proactive method for ensuring there are less information gaps. And as we all know, when information gaps exist, there's more likelihood misinformation and disinformation can run rampant, especially on social media. Then we really need to obtain that incident summary quickly. We have to have a direct linkage to the incident commander or the emergency operations center. We have to address who's affected, who is responding, when did this happen, when can we expect more updates, why should people care? And then we have to prioritize those pieces of information that we have. What's time sensitive? What's most relevant to the current stage of the incident? What information is most likely to help people take action? And then we need to think about sharing what isn't happening. With the current information ecosystem characterized by rumor, misinformation, and disinformation, we have to address what isn't happening too. The public needs information presented in usable, understandable form, organized by category, priority, and value. That may include what to do and what not to do. It may also include what we don't know as the agency. So be helpful, authoritative, compassionate, and collaborative when you're getting that information out there. And then I can't underscore this enough. We have to convey with emotion and imagery. Would you all agree? Let me know in the chat pod if most of us make decisions based on emotions rather than facts. Well, in high stress, high concern situations, the rules of communication are really flipped. We have a diminished ability to process information. During those high stress, high concern, emotionally charged topics, we can typically only process about 3 key messages at a time. And certain myths are so pervasive that no matter how many experts disprove them, they only seem to grow in popularity. However, research indicates that while facts appear to play a very little role in determining public perceptions or concerns, that if we can develop and relay our information in an emotionally impactful way, people will make more informed decisions about their life, health, and safety. And then, of course, we have to be ready for disruptive people, for disruptive incidents, events, and issues. Let me know in the chat if any of you have encountered a social media troll. Social media troll is someone or a group of people or an organization that may have an agenda against your agency or your mission. We need to make sure that we have an internal protocol to deal with those types of issues, to deal with rumors and misinformation and disinformation. And our social media policy and social media strategy should be updated to reflect those protocols. So how do we go about doing that? Well, let's talk about the 5 T's here. How do we set our team up for success? Well, firstly, we need the tools. We need the equipment. We need resources. We need access to social media platforms. And we also need talent. We need trained exercise staff. I'd like everybody, if you can, in the chat pod to write this down. Social media is a skill set. Go ahead, write that in the chat.
Absolutely.
Social media is a skill set. It's something we have to train and practice. It's a function that is integral to the success of our emergency public information operations. We also need to train leadership. We need to train our leadership to manage expectations. This will help influence those plans, policies, procedures, and protocols to assist with our social media operations. Often, without leadership support, we may not be provided the tools necessary to get the job done. And then also think about tempo. The beginning of most incidents are sort of organized chaos. There's an ebb and a flow in information management as the incident progresses. So having a skilled taskmaster at the helm really assists with this. We have to have a taskmaster who sets the battle rhythm and modifies as the incident progresses. We have to have an agile and flexible system and people in place to manage that information flow. And ultimately, it really comes down to a trained and exercised joint information system. Without that, without a trained, exercised joint information system, we really won't have a joint information center or media center that is successful. It's also important to have these planning pieces in place because we have to leverage the golden hour to get information out on social media. Mark, would you agree?
Absolutely. The golden hour is that time frame when the initial stages of the incident, the crisis, the emergency, where we have the best opportunity to communicate information so people can make the best decisions regarding their life, regarding health, and regarding their safety. Now, it's important to note that you don't have an hour to communicate. You should start communicating immediately as soon as you can. And how do we do that? We should have pre-canned, pre-approved messaging, especially when we're talking about social media, that we can begin to start giving people air. We'll talk about that in just a minute, right away. Air is really essential to life and health. You cannot breathe without air, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's talk just a couple minutes about those first few things we need to do in the initial stages of this incident, emergency, or crisis as it pertains to social media. And again, we need to verify. The first thing, we need to verify the situation. Obtain this incident summary from the incident commander. Verify this situation. We can't verify everything off of social media. We need to get on the phone. We need to have these plans, policies, protocols in place to where we can verify the situation through the incident commander or the emergency operations centers. And then we need to conduct or activate our system, our joint information system. Are we going to need more help? And the answer is yes. When we're talking about a convoluted incident or an emergency involving radiation or nuclear, we're going to need a team. There's no way, or it's highly unlikely that one or even two people may be able to manage the amount, the plethora of information across several different platforms that we'll have to manage during an incident like this. And so then you walk yourself right through this little plan for you to engage and get this wheel started. So let's jump right into this communication strategy, because this is something you can do right away for any incident, any crisis, any emergency, especially when we're talking about social media. So again, number one is to obtain that incident summary from the incident commander, the EOC, and we can be monitoring, or we ought to have a 24/7 posture of monitoring social media. So with those three together, when we put those three together, we should be able to acquire an incident summary pretty quick.
And then we have to address the issues and concerns. So, particularly on social media, we have to think about the different types of conversations people are having at this moment, whether it's discussing protective actions or damage or volunteering options. And also taking a look at those common conversational words they might use on social media. Also look for keywords and hashtags that you can analyze. Sometimes the best place to find posts with public perception information is in comments or discussion threads on posts. You can also click on popular links and look for those activity spots.
Yeah, and then once we have that information, now what are the strategies? What are the objectives that we're going to use to reach our communication goals? Are we communicating to alert, inform, reassure? Are we communicating to alert, interact, respond? Are we communicating for sympathy, empathy? Are we trying to get them to take a specific action? Why are we communicating? And this is where we need to focus right now.
Absolutely. And then we have to figure out, well, who are we talking to? Address our target audiences, our intended audiences. So, who does your agency serve? What are their interests? What kinds of problems or challenges are they facing? What are the best platforms to reach them? Identify your target audiences. Are they internal or external? And how do those differ? So, that is key also. We have to know who we're talking to.
And then our key messages. Understand that people under stress can only take a certain amount of information because of the psychological and emotional impact. The news media speaks in sound bites. There's a key there, sound bites. Why did they use that term? Part of that is information, part of that reasoning is because they are bites of information. And we need to make sure that what we're saying to people, what we're communicating to people is consumable. They can consume that at one time. So we say if you can cut it down to one or two key messages, remember what's most important right now, but certainly no more than three key messages.
Absolutely. And then, so incredibly important when you're communicating via social media, which communication channels should you use? What are the platforms that your target audiences use? So what goals can each of those platforms help you accomplish? Remember, not everybody uses every single social media platform out there, and there are different motivations for using those different platforms. For instance, Facebook is used to often connect with friends and family, relationship building, whereas Twitter is used for gathering information on news.
Yes. And then finally, really important, you have to have a strategy for monitoring. Are you hitting the mark? Are you reaching your communication goals? Are your objectives, your strategies, are they working? Do we need to make adjustments? Why? Are we sure that we're giving people what they need to know and also what people want to know? And what is that, Holly? What do people want to know? What do they need to know during a crisis or an emergency?
So, three things. People need to know three things following a crisis. Firstly, they need to know what happened. You should have the facts released as soon as you can. As soon as that information is confirmed, get the information out there. Updates should be frequent. Second, they need to know, what does it mean to me? Place yourself in the affected community's shoes. Provide people with information to enhance their life, health, and safety, and address potential concerns that they may have. It's important to remember that fear of the unknown is often greater than fear of the facts. And then third, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to fix the situation? The public wants to get back to normal as soon as possible. So we have to tell people what we're doing to manage the situation and restore order. Explain how that process will work, how long it could take, and what can be expected. And remember, all three of those things really need to be wrapped up in your virtual tone. Virtual tone is imperative when we are communicating via digital means, specifically social media. We have to consider the context in which we are providing emergency public information, and the words that we use matter. We should avoid jargon, acronyms, abbreviations, emojis, and slang. They don't mean the same things to all people.
In other words, we need to alert people, we need to inform people, and we need to reassure people. And this is a massive undertaking, and especially in a convoluted incident or an emergency involving radiation or nuclear. It's really important that we have a system in place that we can triage information. Right, Hals? It's really important that we have this system in place. So let's talk about the levels of communication. Number one, our first level of communication is what is impacting immediately people's lives, their health, and their safety. This is what we need to be focused on at this moment. We can't be focused on what's going to happen tomorrow. We can't be focusing on the recovery. We can't be focused on answering CNN questions or international news. We need to be focused on what's most important, and that is providing people with air, alerting people, informing people, reassuring people, because air is essential for life, health, and safety. And then number two is urgent, where we need to be able to communicate to those people who are indirectly impacted. Their immediate life and health and safety may not be in danger, but it will come into play really quickly if they're not informed, if they don't take the appropriate action. And then there's less urgent people who just need to know for situation awareness. This is the third category of our triaging information. And then finally, we coined this level of communication, inquiring minds, non-urgent, right? This is just people who want information. It could be the national news media. It could be other people or other stakeholders that the only way for me to put it, they're a little bit ways down the priority on us communicating with, because we really need to focus on immediate life, health, and safety and people who are indirectly impacted. And then we can get back to those inquiring minds later on. So all this in a nutshell, let's recap a little bit of what we talked about in our short time we've had together. Here are some key takeaways. Holly?
So firstly, we hope that you really leave with the understanding that communication is strategic, especially on social media. Remember, it goes back to your virtual tone as well. And also the three things that people need to know: what happened, what does it mean to them, and how are you going about fixing it?
And don't forget the golden hour. The golden hour is the time when we have the best opportunity to communicate information so people can make the best decisions regarding their own life, their health, and their safety.
Absolutely. And please use that information triage process to provide your intended audiences with air to alert, inform, and reassure them. With the volume of information that we are exposed to on social and digital platforms, we must have a process in place to triage and prioritize that information.
Again, my name is Mark Bassnight, my colleague Holly Harden. We're going to take live questions from you. In the interim, here's our contact information. Feel free to contact us at any time. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll be taking live questions and answering your questions in just a minute.
Thank you, Holly and Mark. I appreciate it. And we only have a couple of minutes. And I know you've been monitoring the chat tool. There was a question from Thomas Enciso. If you want to go ahead and respond to how people are doing this during the pandemic.
So it looks like we had one or two answers from folks across the complex, which are much appreciated. So there are some great free opportunities out there. For instance, the Public Relations Society of America, PRSA, when COVID first hit, they offered some free training online that they usually you have to pay a membership fee to participate in PRSA trainings, but they offered some really great free content. There's also other groups through the American Nuclear Society. They're offering some training. Even across the complex, you might be able to find some free online training. But what we found with our group is we've shifted to Adobe Connect Virtual Classroom, which is a really great interactive tool. It's much like the WebEx training that the EMI SIG folks use as well. So you can even have some engaging polling and Q&A. So it's not just a lecture talking head in front of you on a virtual training. But look out there, there's a lot of free stuff out there. And if you have any specific questions about free training, let Mark and I know, and we will hook you up. We'll find you something out there.
We appreciate that, Holly. And again, thanks again to both of you. It's great to see you. Those of you who have the scavenger hunt form, you might want to check Mark's background, just a hint. Also, go ahead and complete the survey below. And they did say that if there are additional questions that we didn't get to, please go ahead and contact them via their email address. You can get it in their presentation or scroll down and click on their names below this description. Up next, again, is Mark and Holly, bridging the gap in risk communication, moving people from awareness to action. Stay tuned, or if you'd like, you can visit another channel for an SBX demonstration, a workshop, but I'm sure you're going to want to stay on. Talk to you later.